Hey guys, welcome back to Fantasy Hub. Today's story is one of my favorites.
Picture this, me, Scarlett Collins, standing in my apartment that night, still wearing my courtroom armor, the navy blazer that usually made me feel invincible, now feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I just lost the biggest case of my career, and the defeat tasted bitter as the bourbon Edward was pouring into his crystal glass. Another loss? Maybe you're losing your edge, darling. His voice dripped with that familiar faux sympathy that had become his trademark over our 5 years together. I watched him swirl the amber liquid, his movements deliberate, calculated, just like everything else about him. My grip tightened around my own glass until I heard the ice crack under the pressure. Edward always knew exactly where to press. 5 years of his constructive criticism had worn me down like a river over stone, eroding my confidence bit by bit until I barely recognized the fierce woman who'd graduated top of her class from Harvard Law. But today, God, today was different. I kept replaying that moment in the courtroom when everything shifted. Melanie Rodriguez, my opposing counsel, had leaned across the aisle after delivering her closing argument. Her dark eyes had found mine, and instead of the usual competitive smirk I expected, there was something else. Something that made my pulse quicken. "You're smarter than this, Collins," she'd whispered, so quietly only I could hear. Fight back. Not fight back against her case, she'd already won that. Fight back against whatever was holding me down, keeping me from being the lawyer I was meant to be. For the first time in years, someone had looked at me and seen more than Edward's pretty girlfriend who happened to have a law degree. "Are you even listening to me?" Edward's voice cut through my thoughts. I blinked, focusing on his face, the perfectly styled hair, the expensive suit, the expression of barely contained irritation that had become his default around me. "Sorry, what?" I said maybe you should consider switching to family law. Something more ... suited to your strengths. The condescension in his tone was nothing new, but tonight it felt different. Tonight I could hear it clearly instead of letting it seep into my bones like poison. Tonight I remembered what it felt like to have someone believe in me. 3 days later, I found myself in Fitzgerald's, a dimly lit legal bar where half the city's attorneys went to drown their sorrows or celebrate their victories. I was definitely there for the former, nursing a whiskey and trying to figure out how to bounce back from my latest defeat. Truce, or do you prefer losing in silence? I looked up to find Melanie Rodriguez sliding into the booth opposite me, 2 fresh whiskeys in hand. She changed out of her courtroom attire into dark jeans and a silk blouse that somehow made her look both professional and dangerously approachable. "Depends," I said, accepting the drink she offered. "Are you here to gloat?" If I wanted to gloat, I'd have sent flowers to your office with a sympathy card. She lifted her glass in a mock toast. "I'm here because you looked like you needed a drink with someone who understands." The amber liquid caught the low light as she spoke, and I couldn't help but notice how her fingers moved with the same confidence she'd shown in court. When she leaned forward, her knee bumped mine under the table, a touch that felt far too deliberate to be accidental. "Understands what?" I asked, though I was already getting pulled into her orbit. "What it's like to be underestimated." Her voice dropped lower, more intimate. "What it's like to have people assume you're not as sharp as you are just because you're beautiful." I nearly choked on my whiskey. "You think I'm beautiful?" "I think you're brilliant," she said, her eyes never leaving mine. "And I think whoever's been telling you otherwise is an idiot." We talked for hours that night. About cases, about the law, about the way the legal system could chew up even the most passionate advocates. But underneath the professional conversation, there was something else simmering, a current of attraction that I kept telling myself I was imagining. It was supposed to be professional. 2 liars having a drink, sharing war stories. but the way Melanie's laugh made something flutter in my chest, the way she listened to me like every word mattered. That was personal. When she walked me to my car, her hand lingered on my arm just a moment too long. See you in court, Collins. Looking forward to it, Rodriguez. I drove home with my heart racing, knowing I was in dangerous territory, but unable to bring myself to care. Edward was waiting for me when I got home, and I could tell from the set of his shoulders that he was furious. He was standing behind his desk in what he called his home office, really just a space where he could spread out his papers and feel important. Where were you? He demanded without preamble. Having a drink. I kicked off my heels suddenly. Exhausted. It's been a long day. With whom? Something in his tone made me look up. He was holding a manila folder, and when he opened it, my blood ran cold. Photos. Someone had taken photos of me and Melanie at the bar leaning close, laughing. Her hand on my arm. Is this why you're distracted? Pathetic? He slammed the folder down, and I stared at the images. They looked so intimate, so telling. In one, Melanie was leaning across the table, her face inches from mine. In another, we were walking to my car, her hand resting possessively on my arm. I should have been afraid. Edward had connections, influence. He could make my professional life very difficult if he wanted to. But as I looked at those photos, all I felt was heat. Heat and a strange sense of recognition, like I was seeing myself clearly for the first time in years. She's opposing counsel, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. We were discussing the case. Discussing? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that what you call it when you're practically undressing each other with your eyes? Don't be ridiculous. Am I being ridiculous? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my girlfriend is making a fool of herself over some what? I interrupted, my voice sharp. Go ahead, Edward. Say what you really think. He had the grace to look slightly ashamed, but not enough to back down. She's using you, Scarlett. Can't you see that? She's probably laughing about how easy it was to get under your skin. But even as he spoke, I could hear Melanie's voice in my head. You're smarter than this, Collins. Fight back. Maybe it was time I started listening. 2 weeks later, I found myself standing outside Melanie's apartment building in the rain, my hair plastered to my head and my heart hammering against my ribs. I'd been walking for hours trying to clear my head after another fight with Edward, and somehow my feet had carried me here. I must have looked like a drowned rat when she opened the door, but her face lit up with a smile that made my knees weak. Scarlett, what are you doing here? I don't know, I said honestly. I was walking and I needed to see you. She stepped aside to let me in, and I became acutely aware of how intimate her space was. Books everywhere, soft lighting, the scent of vanilla and something uniquely her. I was dripping on her hardwood floors, but she didn't seem to care. You're soaked, she said, disappearing into what I assumed was her bedroom. Let me get you some dry clothes. She returned with a soft t-shirt and sweatpants, and I changed in her bathroom, catching a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My makeup was smudged, my hair was a mess, but my eyes looked more alive than they had in months. When I came out, she was waiting with 2 cups of tea and a concerned expression. What happened? She asked gently. Edward found the photos, I said, sinking onto her couch, of us at the bar. Her expression darkened. What did he say? Does it matter? I took a sip of tea, letting the warmth spread through me. He's not wrong, is he, about what was happening between us? What do you think was happening? I looked at her then, really looked at her. She was curled up on the other end of the couch, her dark hair falling over one shoulder, her eyes soft with something that might have been hope. I think, I said slowly, that I've been lying to myself for a long time. She set down her tea and moved closer. About what? About what? I want about who I am, about what I deserve. And what do you deserve, Scarlett? I reached out, my fingers tangling in her shirt. I deserve to be with someone who sees me, really sees me. Tell me to stop, she whispered, her face inches from mine. I had a choice. I could pull back, go home to Edward, pretend this moment never happened. Keep living the safe, suffocating life I built for myself, or I could leap into the unknown. Instead of answering, I yanked her forward, closing the distance between us. The kiss was everything I'd imagined and nothing I'd expected. It was battle and surrender all at once, teeth and whiskey and Melanie's hands everywhere. She tasted like tea and possibility, and when she pressed me back against the couch cushions, I felt something inside me come alive. My phone buzzed against the coffee table, Edward's name flashing on the screen. But before I could even think about answering, Melanie kicked it under the couch with her foot, grinning against my lips. Problem solved, she murmured, and I laughed despite myself. We spent the rest of the night on her couch, talking and kissing, and exploring this new territory between us. It felt like stepping into sunlight after years in the shadows. I should have known Edward wouldn't let it go. I should have known that his connections went deeper than I'd imagined, that his need for control would drive him to extremes. I was in my office the next morning, trying to focus on case files, but mostly reliving the night before when my door burst open. Edward stormed in, his face flushed with rage, throwing another folder onto my desk. "I'll ruin you both," he snarled. These photos were different, more intimate. Someone had followed us, captured moments I thought were private. There was one of Melanie and me kissing against her apartment door, another of us through her window, silhouetted against the lamplight. "You had me followed," I said, my voice deadly calm. "I had to know what I was dealing with. You had me stalked. I had you investigated. There's a difference." Before I could respond, I heard a sound that made my blood sing Melanie's laugh. R-I-C-H and unbothered. I looked up to find her lounging in my desk chair like she owned the place, her dark eyes sparkling with amusement. "Oh, Eddie," she said, her voice like honey over steel. "You really don't know who you're messing with?" Edward's face went white. "How did you get in? I'm a lawyer, darling." "I know how to talk my way past security." She stood, moving with the fluid grace of a predator. "The question is, do you know what you've just confessed to?" I watched in fascination as she backed him against the wall, her presence filling the room, despite being smaller than him. Having someone followed without their knowledge, taking photographs without consent, that's harassment, Edward. Potentially stalking, depending on how long this has been going on. You can't prove. Actually, I can. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a USB drive, sliding it across the desk. Turns out when someone's been emotionally abusing you for years, you start keeping records. Edward's face went from white to gray. "Scarlett, you can't sit down," I said, my voice carrying an authority I'd forgotten I possessed. And he did. He actually sat down, his arrogance crumbling like a house of cards. "The USB has recordings," I continued. "Every threat you've made, every time you've tried to undermine my career, every suggestion that I'm not good enough. Plus financial records showing how you've been using your position to manipulate my cases." Melanie perched on the edge of my desk, her smile sharp as a blade. "And I have contacts in the district attorney's office who would be very interested in this kind of behavior from someone in your position. You wouldn't dare. Try me." The silence stretched between us, thick with tension. Finally, Edward's shoulders sagged in defeat. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want you to disappear from my life," I said simply. "I want you to stop trying to control me, stop undermining me, stop making me feel like I'm not enough. I want you to be the professional you claim to be, and that means staying in your lane. And if I don't, Melanie's smile widened. Then we'll see how your clients feel about being represented by someone who's been charged with harassment and stalking. 3 weeks later, I watched from my office window as news vans lined the street outside. The headlines were everywhere. Prominent attorney arrested for extortion. Legal power couple's dramatic split. From courtroom to jailhouse. It turned out that Edward's need for control went far beyond our relationship. Once the investigation started, other victims came forward. Clients he'd manipulated, colleagues he'd threatened, women he'd tried to silence. The USB drive I'd given the authorities was just the beginning. I watched him being led away in handcuffs, screaming about conspiracy and false accusations, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, just a quiet sense of peace. "How are you holding up?" Melanie asked, appearing in my doorway with 2 cups of coffee. "Better than I expected," I said honestly. It's strange, I thought I'd feel guilty or sad or something, but mostly I just feel free. She handed me a cup and settled into the chair across from my desk. "Any regrets? About Edward?" "No, about us." I looked at her, this woman who'd helped me find my strength again. "Not a single one." "Good," she said, her smile soft. "Because I have something I need to tell you." My heart skipped. "What?" "I've been offered a position in the DA's office. Senior prosecutor." "Melanie, that's incredible." "You've been wanting that for years." "I have. But it would mean we wouldn't be opposing counsel anymore. We'd be on the same side. Is that what you want?" She stood, walking around my desk to where I sat. "What I want is to build something with you. Something real. Something lasting. I want to wake up next to you every morning and come home to you every night. I want to argue cases with you and celebrate victories with you and pick you up when you fall." My breath caught. "Melanie, I want to marry you, Scarlett." The words hung in the air between us, full of possibility and promise. I thought about the woman I'd been 3 months ago, scared, diminished, convinced I didn't deserve better. And I thought about the woman I was becoming, strong, confident, ready to fight for what I wanted. "Is that a proposal?" I asked. "It's a statement of intent. The actual proposal comes later." I laughed, pulling her down for a kiss. "I love you too, by the way." "I know," she said against my lips. "You're pretty obvious about it." 6 months later, I stood on the courthouse steps at dawn, briefcase in hand, preparing for the biggest case of my career. The same steps where I'd felt so defeated after losing to Melanie were now the stage for my comeback. "Ready for this?" Melanie asked, appearing beside me. "As ready as I'll ever be." She was wearing a perfectly tailored suit that made her look like she could conquer the world, and I felt that familiar flutter in my chest. Even after all these months, she still had the power to make me weak in the knees. "Actually," she said, checking her watch, "there's something I need to do first." Before I could ask what, she was on one knee, pulling a ring box from her jacket pocket. The early morning light caught the diamond, sending rainbows across the marble steps. "Scarlett Collins," she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "Will you marry me?" I stared at her, this incredible woman who'd helped me find myself again, who'd stood by me through the chaos with Edward, who'd shown me what it meant to be truly seen and valued. "We have a trial in 20 minutes, I said, my voice shaking. "With laughter and tears." "Then say yes fast," she replied, her teeth grazing her bottom lip in that way that always made me lose my train of thought. "Yes," I said, pulling her to her feet. Yes, obviously yes." She slipped the ring onto my finger, and it fit perfectly, just like everything else about us. "Now," she said, straightening her jacket, "ready to go win this case? With you?" "I'm ready for anything." The trial was everything I dreamed of. And more. For the first time in years, I felt like myself in that courtroom, sharp, confident, unafraid. Every objection was precisely timed, every argument carefully crafted. I could feel the jury responding to my passion, my conviction. And when I looked across the aisle at Melanie, representing the co-defendant, I saw nothing but pride and love in her eyes. We were opponents again, but this time it felt like a dance to experts at the top of their game, pushing each other to be better. Your Honor, I said during my closing argument, the evidence is clear. My client was not only innocent of the charges against him, but he was actively working to expose the corruption that led to his arrest. He deserves not just acquittal, but vindication. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned with a verdict of not guilty on all charges, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, pure, unadulterated triumph. Melanie was the first to congratulate me, crossing the aisle to shake my hand with professional courtesy, while her eyes promised more intimate celebrations later. Brilliant work, counselor, she said formally. You too, I replied, matching her tone. That was some of the best legal work I've ever witnessed. But as we packed up our files, she leaned close and whispered, I can't wait to get you home. The heat in her voice made me shiver despite the courthouse's efficient air conditioning. Our wedding was everything Edward would have hated: unconventional, joyful, completely authentic to who we were. Instead of a traditional church, we chose the law library where we'd first worked together on a case. Instead of flowers, we had an arch made of legal briefs from our most challenging cases. I wore a white tuxedo that made me feel powerful and elegant, while Melanie stunned everyone in a black lace dress that managed to be both sophisticated and slightly scandalous. Our vows were a mix of legal terminology and heartfelt promises, that half the guests laughing and the other half crying. I promise to be your partner in all things, I said, looking into her eyes, to argue with you about legal precedent and never argue about love. I promise to challenge you, support you, and never let you settle for less than you deserve. I promise to see you always, she replied, not just the lawyer or the woman or the partner, but all of you. I promise to fight for us the way we fight for our clients, with passion, dedication, and the absolute certainty that we're right. When the judge pronounced us married, Melanie pulled me close and whispered, objection overruled, against my lips before kissing me thoroughly. The reception was a celebration of everything we'd overcome and everything we were building together. Colleagues who had watched our professional rivalry turn into something deeper raised toasts to our happiness. My parents, who'd never really understood my relationship with Edward, glowed with pride as they watched me dance with my wife. Any regrets? Melanie asked as we swayed to the music. Only that it took me so long to find you, I said honestly. We found each other exactly when we were supposed to. How can you be so sure? Because look at us now. Look at how strong we are, how happy we are. We had to go through everything we went through to get here. The defeats, the struggles, even Edward, it all led us to this moment. I looked around at our friends and family, at the life we'd built together, at the future stretching out before us, full of promise and possibility. The press called it the trial of the century, I said, thinking about Edward's dramatic downfall. And our subsequent rise, what do you call it? The beginning of everything that matters. 6 months into our marriage, I stood in my office, now our office, Rodriguez and Collins, attorneys at law looking out at the city skyline. Our firm was thriving, our marriage was stronger than ever, and I was finally the lawyer I'd always known I could be. Penny for your thoughts, Melanie asked, wrapping her arms around me from behind. Just thinking about how different everything is now. Different how? I leaned back against her, feeling the solid warmth of her body, the steady beat of her heart. A year ago, I was convinced I wasn't good enough. I let Edward make me small, make me doubt everything I knew about myself. And now, now, now I know better. I know I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, with exactly who I'm supposed to be with. She pressed a kiss to my neck. The jury's still out on that one, is it? Actually, no. The verdict came in a long time ago. I turned in her arms, looking into the face of the woman who'd changed everything for me. And, guilty, she said, her smile radiant. Guilty of being the most incredible woman I've ever known. Guilty of making me fall completely, hopelessly in love with you. Guilty of showing me what it means to be truly happy. Guilty of love, I said, echoing the words that had become our private joke. The best kind of guilty. As she kissed me, there in our office, with the city spread out below us and our future stretching ahead, I knew she was right. We were guilty of love, and it was the only verdict that mattered. The story the press told was about scandal and revenge, about power and corruption. But the real story, our story, was about finding yourself in someone else's eyes, about being brave enough to fight for what you deserve, about the way love can transform everything when you're finally ready to let it. I'd started this journey as Edward's diminished girlfriend, convinced I was losing my edge. I'd ended it as Melanie's wife and equal partner, stronger than I'd ever imagined I could be. And that, I thought as she deepened the kiss, was the only ending that mattered.